My name is Ryan Janoy. I'm currently an investment analyst at Bank Tech Ventures, which is a strategic venture firm partnering with community banks. And I'll let my panelists introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Damon Magnuski. I'm the founder and CEO of Acceleron Bank.
My name is Jeff Guerin. I'm a longtime entrepreneur. I've been a venture capitalist. I've been a CEO, CFO, and COO for public and private companies, taken a cloud computing company public. I ran a debt fund for 10 years, and today I'm building out strategic services practice for Wolf & Company.
Let Brian go.
Hey guys, joining you virtually from Philly. I'm an investor at Cameron Ventures. We're an early stage fintech, insurtech, and future of work fund.
Yeah, so really what we're looking to speak about and come to some decisions and give some advice to you guys when navigating co-founder dynamics. It's really important to make the decision to either go alone or join with partners, and it can be a make or break for your business. For co-founders determining if their startup should be more successful as a solo founder or a co-founder model, this panel will really get into the nitty-gritty of it, and we'll hear from some very experienced veterans in the industry, and we'll explore what the benefits and maybe some disadvantages are of having co-founders. So without further ado, we'll start with our first question. And I'll ask Damon, what are the advantages and disadvantages to having more than one founder?
It's kind of a big question. Well, if you, I think let's start with, you have to, work with a co-founder. So hopefully you have some kind of working relationship with that person, and that it's a complementary relationship. If you're good on the tech side, you need someone good on the sales side kind of mentality. You don't want all your founders to have all the same skill set. So yeah, the primary advantages are, diversity of opinion. You guys, you're going to be making a million decisions, and you need different voices in the room in order to make those decisions. On the downside, these are very close relationships, and no matter what kind of startup you're doing, it's going to get combative about some topic, in the future. So you have to understand, how you have conflicts with these co-founders and how you can resolve it.
Yeah, Jeff, do you have any insights there?
I think that it's real important to keep in mind that whether you're a single founder or you're a team, that you have to have a common direction. Like to tell people that the first things I look for when I'm talking to an early stage founder or a founder team is focus, focus, and focus, right? You talk to a venture person, they'll tell you it's team, technology, and market opportunity. It's extremely important that you really only have one captain of the ship, though. You have to be moving in the same direction. Go watch a bunch of young 6 and 7-year-olds play soccer, and they play bunch ball. They all move together, except when Johnny or Susie breaks away because his or her parents taught her or him how to be a better offensive player or a better defensive player, and so they'll make a play. But it's really key that the entire team move down the field at essentially the same speed. And with startups, and especially co-founder relationships, very, very important. You're going to spend a lot of time together. In many cases, you're going to make sacrifices that are going to affect your family and your friends and other relationships. And getting along is really, really important.
Yeah, Brian, do you have any insights when it comes to that?
Yeah, we won't invest in founders or a single founder. There's a lot of reasoning behind that, but I guess the number one and most important thing is understanding how whoever the CEO is, whoever's leading the ship, so to speak, can lead and deal with other people that have differing opinions. As venture investors and as board members, we don't always agree with the direction of the business. So it's always helpful to have someone that is playing devil's advocate or with a complementary skill set. And Jeff, to your point, the relationship that you have with your founder, if you're a successful entrepreneur, could be anywhere from 5 to 7 years or even longer. Statistically, that is longer than most marriages last. So you need to pick very carefully.
Yeah, that's funny, Jeff. I think you make an interesting point too with having a focus going in. To dive a little bit deeper into that, how important do you think it is to have a set vision before bringing on other founders or before going into a new venture?
Well, I think the single vision is important, Ryan, but it's a shared vision. We all come to this business or opportunity with different lenses. And so it's important as maybe one of the one or two people early on who are going to be the founders of an organization to listen to each other very, very carefully. Brian made a good comment. He said, often founding relationships can be longer than most marriages. That's a sad state. If you've been married for a while, I've been married 37 years. And the reason that those relationships work, don't tell my wife this, but the reason these relationships work is because if you read Sun Tzu carefully, what you'll find is one of the theories that he enunciates is common enemy theory. And when you have a common enemy, you're all pushing in the same direction. It's very similar to the concept I described a moment ago about soccer teams. If you've got a common enemy and your founding team is all going after the same ultimate goal, they're not bad things. It's just an objective. And if you're all moving in the same direction, you've got a lot better chance of surviving for a lot longer. I've been through many founding teams and founded quite a few companies myself. And often the people who I still work with today are people who, while we have differing opinions and we have differing backgrounds, we have a common objective.
Yeah, that's great. And I'd also like to throw it back to Brian. And from a venture perspective, when you are analyzing these startups and looking at these founding teams, what are some key things that you're looking for in these teams or from a solo leader?
So good question. I guess the number one thing that I care about, and keep in mind my perspective and answer is going to be different than every other VC's. So take it with a grain of salt or not, totally up to you. But I really want to work with a founder that's coachable. I'm pretty early in my career. I don't have all the answers, but there are some things that I have some career experience with that in particular individual might not. I couldn't code my way out of a paper bag, but I understand go-to-market strategy and sales pretty deeply. They need to be able to take my feedback into account and not in this kind of, investor versus founder kind of relationship. We're working towards the same goal and our financial outcome is tied to the founder's financial outcome. The other piece I would say is pretty deep technological experience, at least on that team. We like to have one technical founder and one founder that has that go-to-market expertise, even at the earliest stages. So we understand how the business might develop and how those skill sets complement each other. We know like when we make our first investment, it's usually at the pre-seed or seed stage. The business is going to look vastly different 3, 4, 5 years from now. All of it is pro forma. The idea might change completely. We've had companies change the industry that they sell into, pretty drastic changes. But we need to understand how that team and that skill set will be able to translate to any industry or any problem.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Brian. And I'd like to ask Damon, I know you've you all mentioned kind of having those founders that balance each other out. I'd love to hear about some of your experiences where that has been successful.
Yeah, I mean, startups pivot a ton, especially if you're doing it right. So, it goes back to kind of Jeff talking about the vision and everyone moving towards one goal as a founder, and you're putting together. And this isn't just for co-founders; this is just for your team writ large. You need to sell the vision to folks that might be, taking a pay cut to work with you or working for equity, things like that. So with the vision, if you have a strong vision and kind of team outlook and goal, you start to attract people that it resonates with. And so that's how I've come to acquire the two co-founders of our bank.
Great. And then getting more into the logistics of it. If I am a young solo founder and I'm looking to partner with someone like you guys have mentioned that really balances me out, whether it's from a go-to-market side or a technical side, how would I go about finding this co-founder and someone who can create a shared vision with me? Jeff, if you want.
Wow. That's like, how do I get married?
Yeah.
How do I meet a spouse? I don't think you do. I think you network, you spend time with people who have shared vision and shared values, and you stick, if you're the original founder of an idea, you have to find other people who look at what you're doing through different lenses. As Brian said, looking at, if I'm a finance guy, which is what I am, and I'm looking at building out a debt fund, which I did, I still needed somebody who had a legal background, somebody who had compliance information systems information on my team. I needed to have a technical founder who understood, not necessarily from a coding standpoint, because we weren't writing anything, but from an IT standpoint, how we remain secure. And the way you find those people is through your personal network. But if you're, and I don't think it matters whether you're fresh out of school or you're got a little bit of gray hair, it's all through your network. You will find people that you have like mind with, 1 to 3 degrees of separation from people that you know. And so when you talk about what you need, they may not be that person, but they may know a person who knows a person, right? Your favorite line is, "I know a guy," right? And I think that's the first step. The second is, again, not so much like or so different from dating, which I haven't done in a long time, but I've done some founding recently, and finding people is hard, and you have to not be afraid to walk away. We talk a lot about building, that minimum viable product. If you're out trying to sell something to somebody who doesn't want to buy what you're selling, move on. Go find somebody else to talk to, because there are plenty of people with plenty of passion. And the beauty of the internet and the beauty of Web3 and our current communication strategies, being able to be with Brian, and he's in a completely different place on this panel, means that we can be without borders in finding people and sharing those ideas, and be amazed the number of people you're going to find who have the same ideas you do. And now your real problem is weeding those people down to people who have enough passion to stick with it through the hard times.
Yeah, that's great. And going back to, I know you mentioned the hard times, and there'll definitely be a lot of those when founding your own venture. But once you are in this co-founder relationship, have any of you guys seen a situation in which you guys kind of have different visions and there's some disagreements on your strategy going forward and how you guys overcame that?
Yeah, it's like quarterly. So, I mean, let's kind of frame it out a little bit. So you have kind of the end vision goal of what you're trying to build or make or create. And that shouldn't change drastically regularly, but the tactics to get there change all the time. We're talking about, you might need to approach a totally different client set. You might be talking about a drastic change in technology. And, one part of being, like the captain is you have to listen to the experts you have, and also bring in some experts from the outside when there is a disagreement that you can't resolve internally. You can't be afraid to talk to your board or talk to your investors or talk to other founders to kind of navigate. If it's a discussion around tactics and nobody has that experience, you need to go outside to get that experience. And a good co-founder relationship, both parties or all 3 parties or however many you have, will recognize that it's not about one person's ego, it's about moving the problem forward.
Great. Yeah. Brian, I'd also like to ask for your thoughts on this and if you've seen any specific examples in companies that and startups that you've invested in that kind of go through these growing pains.
Yeah, we've had some co-founder breakups. We've had, a lot of open communication. Sometimes it helps to bring in a third-party arbitrator. The same way in a marriage, sometimes you need, couples counseling. There's always that third person that can provide a little bit of insight outside of the context of the relationship to just help calm everybody down. To be honest. There's a lot of bickering just in the same way, you bicker with your spouse over who took out the trash or who walked the dog. At the end of the day, it's really about that shared passion and this shared goal. And, Ryan, to your question before, there's kind of a legendary story at Boston College, my alma mater. There's a company called Drizzly that was founded out of there. And they had a shared passion for drinking when they were in college, and they were like, why can't we get alcohol delivered on campus? So they used to have to go walk all, I think it was like 5 or 6 blocks to the nearest liquor store to go get some beer. And then, they were like, well, why don't we just build the Uber for alcohol? And they actually just sold to Uber in the last couple of years for, almost $1 billion, right? It doesn't have to be this thing where you have to hunt someone down at a conference like this, or you have to go sit in a coffee shop and, try and pick out the smartest person you see to say, try and recruit them to join your business. It could be as simple as, a drinking buddy has a shared passion for, wanting easier access to booze. But we deal with, founder issues and, employee issues quite a bit on, who wants the direction of the company to go this way and who thinks the strategy should be X. The best advice that I can give if you're dealing with something like this now, or, thinking that you might deal with it in the future, is just to have an open dialogue, with your co-founder or with that employee on why those differences are there. Not to get them to come around to your view of the world, but to have a complete understanding of why they have that position. And, maybe that is the right way to go. Broaden your own horizon a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I also agree as a current Boston College student that most of my friends' biggest concern right now is the easiest way to attain alcohol. So, but going back to our point, from a broader perspective, how would an advisory board or general board mitigate these risks associated with these co-founder disagreements or differences in vision? Jeff, if you'd like to start.
Well, I want to throw it to Brian first because I want to hear what he has to say because he's active in it every day right now.
Another good question, another touchy one. I'd say, the advisory board is there, and ideally the reason that you formed an advisory board in the first place is because they have some kind of expertise that you lack. So if you're arguing with your co-founder on the right way to market your product, right, and one co-founder is technical, the other is sales oriented, it makes sense to go to an advisory board to get a third party opinion who has been there and done that, right? That's why that advisory board is there. That's why your board of directors is there. You can always go and speak with other heads of marketing at other startups. That's also a great idea. I did that a lot when I was on the sales side and I was an operator through our venture or through our investors. They would connect us with other heads of sales at their other portfolio companies, other heads of marketing, so on and so forth, to get a better understanding of how they do things, right? Maybe that's the right approach for us to take. But let's kind of boil the ocean a little bit, see everything that's out there before we make a choice, right? And that's, again, part of that open dialogue, not say, hey, it's my way or the highway. Let's see what's out there and see what everyone else thinks.
Yeah, that's great. And Damon, I know you're going through your venture now with Acceleron Bank. And are there any specific tools that you use or specific, I guess, ways in which you kind of get through these differences in vision or strategy?
We never have differences. I mean, I'm fortunate in that we have our differences, but we've been working together long enough to where, we can kind of know when someone needs to take a break, or, we all can take pretty heated feedback from each other and not take it personally, which is a big deal. And generally our approach, and this might not be always the best approach, is as an executive team, we try and and get over any major hurdles. And then only if we need to go to the board level to resolve anything major, right? That's the goal. And we always try and listen to junior members on the team. We do our best to resolve it internally the best we can before we get to outside sources. But to be clear, like we are going to some outside sources now because none of us have some experience with certain things, and we don't know the right way to go. So you have to be able to reflect upon yourself, and you have your team members reflect like, hey, this is outside of what we're used to deciding. Maybe we should get some outside expertise. So it's difficult. There's no like silver bullet for this kind of thing.
So you guys are right on. I would summarize what you've said, which is, I live by a bunch of these axioms, but two that come to mind here. The first is what I call the 3-day rule. I ask myself whether or not I'm going to care in 3 days. If I'm not going to care in 3 days, I'm not going to worry about it now. If I am going to care about it in 3 days, I'm going to fix it now. And the second one has to do, and I'm terrible at this. We all are, but I'm terrible at this. You have to assume positive intent. Everybody who's working with you, especially your founders and your co-founders and your investors, everybody's got your best interests and the company's best interests in mind. They're really not coming to tell you things because they want to hurt your feelings. They're coming to tell you things because they're trying to help you and the organization grow and be successful. So I actually have a Post-it on my home machine. I live in Las Vegas, but on my home machine that sits there and says, assume positive intent. Because you're always trying to grow, you're always trying to be open, and your team is trying to do the same, and you're not all always working in the same place. So think about the 3-day rule and assume positive intent.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Just leaving those open levels of communication between founders and your team. And it's great to stay in that space. But I do have to give you the alternative question here. I want to pose this to Brian because I know you did mention that you have seen some co-founder breakups in your day. And I guess my question is, when to know when a co-founder dynamic really just isn't working and the best solution is to separate?
I'd say for the most part, it's not because of a massive difference in vision for the company. It's not because someone wants to pivot and the other founder doesn't. More often than not, it's just life. You have, outside of your business, right? You still have family, you have friends, you have other life goals that you might be trying to achieve. And building a startup is not a 9 to 5, right? It's a 24/7, 365 kind of thing. You can't always balance both. And I forget who said it, but there was a pretty famous quote in the tech world where, if you're a founder, there's no such thing as balance. The only thing that you can try and find is harmony, right? How can you get the two parts of your lives to work together? And when in the, thankfully, very few co-founder breakups that we have seen, it's because a founder wanted to move on and started a new business, or they just had a kid and they wanted to spend more time with their child. And, they had, taken some secondary off the table and, wanted to raise their family, right? These are not, hey, I have this vision for this company and, we're going in a completely different way than I thought we were going to go. 9 times out of 10, it's not that. Just sometimes life just gets in the way.
Yeah, great. Damon, Jeff, you have any insights there?
Having been through a couple of co-founder breakups, both as the person who ended up leaving and as the person who ended up staying, I would have to say that sometimes it is a difference of opinion, but more often it's a difference of values. It's extremely important, I think, to make the right decision and to make an honest decision and be able to wake up in the morning, look yourself in the mirror, and be proud of your own integrity and where you're going with the company, with regard to your investors and with regard to your ultimate vision. And if you find that there's a co-founder or an employee in your organization who's willing to everything's a matter of degree, but to skirt the rules, then you need to take into consideration whether or not that's indicative of something that down the road may or may not have an impact on your ability to be successful as an organization or to be able to raise the next round of funding. And sometimes you have to make a hard decision to be true to yourself, be true to that integrity, be true to those values, be honest with yourself, and decide that either you're not going to stay or that that person has to leave. And it isn't a he or she or you. You have to make your own decision and execute on that for yourself. That's the only time I've seen founders actually break up from an ongoing endeavor. I've had plenty of opportunities and situations where the thing's going south and life experience gets involved, as Brian was saying. And the family will say something. Well, I'll give you a real world example. 1996, I brought the first internet toy to market. And we sold a ton of them through Circuit City. Circuit City then didn't replenish the shelves. When the RMAs came back in May, they were literally unsaleable. I was managing my own venture fund and 3 companies as the CEO at the time. And my son, who's now grown, sends me in the mail in June of 1996 a Father's Day card written in crayon that says, "Dad, won't you take a day off?" I still get a little teary when I think about it. But after a really good cry, and I mean it, I shut down 3 companies the next day and wrote 7 figures worth of checks out of my own pocket because there was no point in going forward. The life experience and the values and that honesty and that integrity was more important than whether or not we were going to make millions of dollars. Founding teams are hard.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about some of your experiences, Damon.
Well, after that one, I'm not, I don't have anything.
I already set a high bar for it.
Yeah. No, that's all right. No, yeah, I don't have many personal experiences on kind of co-founder breakups. I've witnessed some, from the side, and some of it comes to, you have to, depending on the co-founder relationship, one co-founder may have put in a significant amount of money versus a different one, right? It's just how it goes. And often the one with the money kind of can win certain arguments. And so you have to just be aware of that's a dynamic that money brings dynamic to the table if the co-founders haven't put in an equal amount or there's some misbalance there. But yeah, most of the ones I've seen from the sidelines have been, personal changes. Yeah, most co-founders that I know that have broken up are still friends with the other co-founders. It just didn't work out. And then that's the other thing is, if you're doing startups correctly, you should start up as fast as you can and burn out as fast as you can, so you don't have like 15 years of stress to like not exit out or whatever, So it's, I don't know, it's not a simple thing.
Right. And Jeff, I really like how you mentioned having shared values is very important, not just a shared vision. Outside of the logistics of starting a new venture, how important is it to have shared values from a work-life balance with your other co-founders?
Critical. Absolutely critical. I would say that it's a mutual respect. On the day that I had made this decision that I just described, I had 3 co-founders who were part of 2 of those companies with me. And as it turned out, they were fighting their own battles outside of the business. I didn't know what they were because I was too focused on my own problems. And there was a lot of mutual respect there when we sat down the day after and I said, "I'm done and I'm prepared to write the checks necessary to shut this down." They had to make the decisions about whether or not they wanted to continue to push that, we're Sisyphus, right? Whether they wanted to continue to push that rock up the hill. Now, it really is a question of shared values at that level as well. But I can also tell you, I've been involved in some really successful companies, and we all move in the same direction. The values are the same. The goals continue to be the same, and the results are great. So it's not all bad. We just happen to be talking about. But I got a question for the two of you, because you guys are more into this than I am, which has to do with the gorilla in the room we haven't been talking about, which is inequity of equity. So as a founding team, we tend to have to make decisions about who's going to get how much equity and why. And so I'm actually curious, from Damon, from your perspective as an operating founder, and Brian, from your perspective as a more contemporary investor, how do you deal with the inequities that are inevitable in our founding teams when, by example, I'm the guy who came up with the idea, and I brought two other people into the firm, and we're now ready to start raising money. Somebody wants us to have a cap table, and there are inequities in how people feel about how much equity they should have at the outset, and what you do in adjusting the cap table as you move forward. So I'm kind of curious from you guys how you work with that. Sorry, Ryan.
All good.
Brian, you go first.
Put me on the hot seat. I can't speak too much to the actual inception of the company and kind of who gets how many shares and when, but I can provide maybe a different perspective on it. As you are setting up your business, you should understand that most lawyers will tell you to put 10 million shares on the cap table, and you can divvy that up as you see fit. Leave some room for your employees, whether that's 10%, whether that's 20%. Investors like to see that clean cap table. We don't really care as much, if co-founder 1 has this much equity and co-founder 2 has this much. But we want to see that option pool there is I guess the jargon for it in the venture world. So that's a recruiting tool. It helps absolve any potential issues of, hey, wait, now we have to put this option pool together to give equity to our employees now that we've raised some money, and are going to start to give them a little bit of upside in the equity of the business. Is that going to come out of my pocket? Is it going to come out of your pocket? Is it both of our pockets? How does that work? It just makes things a little bit easier, and also contextualizes hey, this business today is 50-50, but tomorrow it's going to be maybe 15%, 70% investors, right? Or so on and so forth. And then, when you're a public company, you're going to have random people you don't even know that might own shares in your company one day. Hope that's helpful. I know it doesn't address the question head on, but.
I think that's helpful. What I think a lot of starting entrepreneurs don't understand is that at each grade of VC capital, there's kind of expectations of what the cap table should look like, some kind of broad tier percentages. And, so you should think about that. Yet, I would say just whoever the captain is should have a significant bigger chunk than the other co-founders, right? Just because that's the person who's going to be making, the hardest decisions. Probably that's the person who has the idea for the company. And then after that, people are going to say, well, in this series company, they get this percentage. You bring it on a CTO or something like that. So you have to kind of educate yourself a little bit, and kind of as annoying as it sounds, you kind of have to like pre-tranche some of this stuff out, because if it's too weird, investors are not going to work with you. And if it's too skewed, the power differential can sink the company too. So you have to, it has to be comparable. You can't have like 99%, 1% in a co-founder relationship. No one's going to want that. But it also can't be like 2% founders, 98% investors, unless you're a public company or something. So it's a very difficult thing, divvying out the equity. And that's where kind of money comes into. If people are putting in different amounts of money, then that kind of complicates it too. So it's not simple at all. I would highly suggest you talk to investor types. You do, internet research has a pretty good charts about how to kind of structure these things.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you guys. I also
I got one more thing.
go ahead.
So one more common problem that I've seen many startups fail with is they divvy up the shares however they do it, but they don't have the vesting proper. So if that co-founder leaves after a year, they still have a giant tranche in the company, and then they're just a thorn in your side because they have voting power and this and that. So especially with stock options, you can have them vest, and then when they leave, they either have to buy the options or leave, right? There's no hanging on for the future, right? So that's another that's another thing that can be a problem with co-founders.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for all your insights, guys. I do want to address, we have some questions in the chat right here. So Amy is asking, I'm a solo founder. She's currently a solo founder, and everyone is telling her that she needs more than one founder. And she's wondering why that is, if anyone. I'll leave it open to all of you guys.
Look, I'll give you my opinion. I think if you're a solo founder, you're okay. There are a lot of venture folks who are brilliant. Brian is brilliant, who believe that it's important to have multiple co-founders. I think it's important to have a founding team and have other people who are working with you very closely who are of like minds. I don't know that they have to be called founders. I've gotten, again, I told you I'm a finance guy. I get involved in some of the companies that I've been involved in pretty late in the game. And I don't deserve to be called a founder, but I have a pivotal role in how the company is going to get built out and where we're going to go and how we're going to get down that path. But, to Brian's point and to Damon's point and what I made earlier, there can only be one captain of the ship. And sometimes that person is the founder. It's one of the real dilemmas in this co-founder question is not at the beginning, but it's in the B, C rounds before you're going to go public, along the way where your technical founder shouldn't be running the company. And it's how the team works through those dynamics. And with the help of your investors and your venture folks and your mentors and the people on the advisory committees, if that person has really been a good leader, they're going to recognize that they're a better CTO than they are CEO. And it's not always about money.
Yeah, let me add to that too. I think because I was probably the most critical about having more than one founder in a company. The pure logistical I guess opinion from the venture side of things is just key man risk. If we invest in you and put $1 million or $2 million into just an idea and we want to see you build it out, God forbid you get hit by a bus tomorrow, but you are the only person building the company, right? We don't want to step in and do that. That's not what we do, right? We spread risk around multiple different companies in multiple different sectors doing multiple different things so that we can index and hopefully return a fund many times over. It would be as if you wanted to put all your eggs in one basket, right? Not that, Amy, you're not a capable founder that can do it yourself, right? Like there are many businesses that are started by, solo founders, but just the pure legal and logistical risk of having only one individual building that business from the ground up is a lot for some VCs to bear. That's why, Jeff talks about bringing on founding team members. They don't have to have 30 or 40% of your business, but if you have an engineer that you've been working with and they've been moonlighting and consulting with you to help, build out the product, and you can't quite bring them on as your CTO, or you don't think they have enough experience, you can call them a founding engineer. Everything in startups is, just a title. It doesn't really matter at the earliest days. That person might grow up to be your CTO one day when you are going public, or they might stay exactly where they are as like a senior, full stack engineer or something like that. But in the earliest days, it doesn't make sense to think about those titles. It's who is your core team and why is this team the right group to bring this new innovative product and technology to market.
Yeah, to add on what they're saying, without understanding at all what Amy's trying to build, but if you can answer the question, do I have enough funding to keep growing this business, sales, engineering, et cetera, or hire the people you need to hire? Yeah, you probably don't need co-founders, but if you need to start asking random investors for money, co-founders can bring connections to the table. It shows that you can sell your vision at least to other people, right? So there's that kind of thing. So I think if, as an entrepreneur, and sorry, Brian, you should never try and get venture capital. It's very difficult. It's very time consuming. We're talking about all these like percentage ownership questions. That's all for venture capital, right? If you have a business and you can grow it at a reasonable clip without taking on high risk money, then that's the preferred move. But I think if you're having if people are asking you, maybe you should get some co-founders, that might be suggesting there's some complementary skill set, someone, you might need to add to your team. Not necessarily as a co-founder, could be just executive team kind of thing.
Yeah, and I'd argue too, right? Some of the largest companies in the United States, even in the world, never raised $1 of venture capital. I mean, MailChimp sold to Intuit for $12 billion, a couple years ago. They'd never raised $1 outside of the founding team. Maybe they put some early money in on themselves, and they essentially wrote a loan to the business, and the business paid them back after they were able to financially. And they 100% owned the business when they sold it to Intuit. That not every business is suited for venture capital, and I think that's a pretty key distinction where entrepreneurs will spend a lot of time thinking, I need to raise VC money. Like, that's how I'm gonna show that my startup is successful. Many cases you don't even need it. Damon, I don't know if you've taken in any capital, but it doesn't seem like Acceleron Bank necessarily needs it. There's a lot of instances
we always need money.
Bankers.
Wonder whether I can ask a question. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on co-founder dynamics. My name is Tony Zan. I'm organizer of a founders community. We have over 300 founders in our community. One of the questions that keep coming up is related with restricted stocks versus options. And these are the two forms of compensation to co-founders or founders. What's the difference, and what do you advise, and what do you see most often?
I can take this one just
Please.
quickly. As not an attorney or an accountant, take this with a grain of salt. That's when you're talking about these things. Primarily, it's a tax decision, because you can vest them the same way. So you always want to, when you're giving a tranche of your company to someone else who's not an investor, you want it to, typically there's like a 1-year cliff where they have to at least last a year before any of those vest, and then it kind of vests quarterly after that. Whether you take it as options basically defer all the taxes to the end. And then if you're taking it as restricted stock, you pay the tax up front, knowing you're going to get it back. And if you give them up, you can get those funds back from the IRS, but that's always a headache.
Well, there's also the dynamic difference between an option and an RSU, or a restricted stock unit. Restricted stock units, usually the holder has shareholder rights, including voting rights, where if you've got an option, you have no rights until you convert that option into shares. So that's usually the first thing that we tend to use RSUs for versus stock options. But to Damon's point, you can still vest them the same way. The only difference is I get to vote my RSUs today. I can't vote my options until I've converted them. And I'm also not a lawyer or a CPA.
Yeah, let me start with that too. This is not legal advice. I'm not a lawyer, but I've seen portfolio companies and companies that we've looked at actually favor RSUs so that they can provide the tax benefits to their employees. But they typically include some kind of clause that if they leave after a certain amount of time, or there's some kind of threshold, that they have the right to buy those shares back, so that someone doesn't just come to a company, buy their shares, stick around for a little bit, and then go leave for something else.
As a follow-up, you said, are the tax issues mitigated with like an 83B?
I think we're getting a little bit into the weeds there. 83B is talking about, what was the value of the stock when it was issued, and then you get you pay the difference in tax, right, of what the actual stock price is. So it matters. It definitely matters if you're just first starting the company to get that 83B done, and then when you get RSUs in the future, it matters, but it's less. It matters less. But it's whether you pay the taxes now or you pay taxes later. That's kind of the gist of it.
And I would just add, equity is only worth what it's worth when you get to an exit.
That's right.
From day one to the exit, it's very exciting. It's fun to have more rounds of financing, but if you don't get to the exit, you can have a small piece of a big pie or a big piece of a small pie, but if it goes to zero, you've got no pie.
All right. And since I have the mic, I actually had an actual question. This is kind of a personal question. It's an argument I have a lot. My name's Igor. I've had like a dozen startups, several exits, and several co-founder disagreements, or breakups rather. And my question is this: so, as a co-founder looking for a co-founder, or as a founder looking for a co-founder, I'm of the opinion, kind of like what you said, like go all in, burn out fast. And my mentality is like, if I have an idea at 3 a.m., I can call you at 3 a.m. If you have an idea at 3 a.m., you can call me at 3 a.m. Like, I might not pick up because I'm asleep, but if I'm not asleep, I'll pick up, right? And I had a co-founder, a breakup a couple of years ago where I called someone at like 7 and they yelled at me because they were at dinner, right? And I'm like, this is not gonna work. So I'm curious on like what your opinion on that. Like, this is like more of a sanity check. Like, am I crazy that I feel like I should call my co-founder at like 3 a.m. and they should pick up?
I don't think you're crazy as long as you select the right co-founders, right? So if that's a requirement of your co-founders, then when you make those decisions, you got to make sure that they're aware of that, right? Versus, you could have a startup. And yeah, I work all kinds of crazy hours, but I do take time to have dinner with my family, and I don't take calls during that time. So, but everyone on my team's aware of that, and it's not a friction point because we're at a maturity to where nothing has to change within an hour. Like that. That's kind of where we're at. So I think with any co-founder relationship, you got to be pretty transparent of what your expectations are about availability, and there could be friction with folks that have come from industry and are used to a more 9 to 5 schedule. But you're talking at like very beginning kind of startup stuff versus more mature startups. I'm not ever going to say it's 9 to 5, but you can have windows of sanity and time for your family and things like that.
I'd say put together, I call it an operating system, but just put together a Google Doc, Notion, whatever you want to use. Hey, here's my do's and don'ts, right? Here are my pet peeves. Here's what I want to do. Like, I need to be comfortable calling you at 3 a.m. Just lay it out, like be transparent. If that person's cool with it, then, you found a great partner and meets your values and your timeline. If not, then, move on to someone that's okay with that, right? Even if you end up partnering with that person, then they should also put together an operating system so that you know where their boundaries are, so that you're not crossing them and not harming that relationship.
It's a great idea. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Namrata, and I'm going to be a new founder, actually co-founder. And so this question comes from that place, right? So we speak about it being like a marriage, you know what I mean? So most of us know how to approach that. However, being somebody who's new to this kind of a relationship, outside of the obvious, right? Outside of the obvious things, what are some gotchas? What are some things or some discussions that I should have early on to prevent problems later on?
You want to start, Jeff?
Shared values.
Yeah, shared value.
Shared values. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name, but the comment about can are you going to be available 24/7? There isn't a reason why you have to be or can't be. But as Brian said, setting those ground rules up, whether it's a Google Doc or it's however you do it. I was counseled by somebody when I was in a public company because I'm a 24/7, 365 guy. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to call you at 3 a.m. because you may not be. But know that I'm thinking about these things. Be cognizant of how your co-founders and how the culture of your company is going to communicate. I worked for a person who shall remain nameless because I love him dearly, but he sent me zingers at 3 a.m. a couple of times a week. And our hours crossed kind of by time zones. Even though we were in the same time zones, we were doing different things. And he would send me nasty grams before he went to bed. I'd wake up in the morning and I'd get his nasty grams. And we ultimately ended up breaking up 6 years later because I couldn't handle the nasty grams anymore. So you really have to think about your culture and how you're treating people. And this goes to my 3-day rule and assuming positive intent. I absolutely believe to this day he didn't really have a negative bone in his body. It was just the tone of how he wrote at the end of his business day when he was done with his 12 or 14 or 16 hours. So just know the people you're working with and know that you don't know them on day one.
Thank you for that.
Just to add real quick, when things come up that are friction points, and there will be between you and this other person, make sure you have, the confidence to approach them and be like, hey, we had this issue. I didn't like XYZ, or they might have the same thing for you. And just have an open mind. It's just communication, people being good to other people. And you should be able to get through it.
Hello, my name is Kevin. Thank you for your time. Unfortunately, my co-founder passed away very early on in the company's life. He had a few aces that he was really great with, from, finance to scientific ability, great network, all those things. And so I kind of have two parts to the question, which is like, there's only so much equity in a company. So should I try and find somebody who can really like fill all those shoes and like promote to VP, or should I try and like sectionally, and that's why. And then I found somebody, I prayed on it. I met a new person. He's in Africa, but he's raw. He wasn't formally educated, but he's brilliant in his own right. So I'm trying to be patient with him and bring him along and be fair to everybody in the process, because he does fill some of those shoes, but I'm working through those type of things right now. So if you can speak to any of that type of perspective, that'll be great. Thank you.
If you want to.
Brian, you want to take
Brian,
it?
you want to take this one? I got some opinions too.
Sure. Well, first of all, sorry so much for your loss. It's not an easy thing to go through, family or friend, especially as you're building a business with someone. I don't know if there's ever someone that could completely fill that individual's shoes. There's a reason why you embarked on this journey to go start a business together. So I would maybe advise you to not try and or find someone that checks every box, because I don't think there's ever going to be that individual. Find someone that is complementary to you, that understands where you are in the business life cycle, right? If it's this individual that you're talking about in Africa that doesn't have that formal business education but can be coachable, that might not be a co-founder per se or right by title, but is someone that you can rely on in the same way that you relied on your prior co-founder. But I'll leave you with that.
Yeah, again, sorry for your loss. That's a terrible scenario. I think you feel just from tactical perspective, you feel the need that you have, like the greatest need. Nobody's going to fill every single check every single box, and then kind of to protect yourself, this is where vesting comes in. You're right. There is only so much equity, but you can give someone a big slug, but make sure it vests over a while. So there's tactical ways to kind of maybe if you're unsure, get them on an advisory board or even a board member. Kind of try before you buy. You understand what they're doing for the company, before you commit a big equity slug or a big salary, because that can sink a ship for sure. Not to say this will be in your case, but if you pay for a high power executive and it turns out there wasn't a cultural fit or it just wasn't going to work out, it's hard to lose a year as a startup.
I'll also tell you, I'm sorry for your loss, but I'm in a cold SOB. And if your co-founder who passed away had a large portion of the business, there's a desire on your part to protect the family, and I respect that. I really do. But you're probably going to have to expand the number of shares that are in the company and dilute that family in order to be able to carry the business forward. And if you're successful, it won't matter because they'll have a piece of a very successful pie. Unfortunately, that's where these aren't familial family relationships, but this is business. And so if you have to expand your cap table in order to be able to bring on some of the talent that you need, you have to make those hard decisions. But again, really sorry for your loss.
Yeah.
To everybody in the room, this is why Brian made the point he made about co-founders and making sure that you've got a team. Unfortunately, life happens sometimes not in the best of ways. So if you're a sole founder and something happens, then your investors are faced with a set of risks that they may not choose to take. And that was Brian's point earlier. And you have to recognize that position as well.
We are time.